Hi, everybody, and welcome to tonight's webinar. I'm Leslie with the New Mexico Small Business Development Center, and I'm really pleased to introduce everyone to Eddy Mindlin. Let me just give you the short version because he can tell you a little bit more about his background, but he is a SCORE certified mentor, which means that he has years of experience in the topic, sales essentials, how to attract and retain customers. So Eddy, if you'll turn to next slide, I'll give some people some of the information. I want to remind everyone to type any questions that you have into the Q&A because he'll pick them up throughout the entire webinar. We're lucky enough to have him for a series of these webinars going into the next couple weeks. And we had one that's available pre-recorded on demand. We had a lot of questions coming in. So if you think of something just that you'd like to ask Eddy, he'll pick them up. We want to remind everyone to set your Zoom ratio to fit Windows. Like I said, we'll be using the Q&A function to take any questions. Next slide, please. This page here, we send you a copy of the presentation after today, so you'll get a copy of all these slides. But here's some of the New Mexico COVID-19 business resources that are available for you. Also, we have other, and you found this one, but we have other trainings and webinars available at no cost to you. I am just doing September right now, and we have 30 plus webinars. So we have all kinds of different trainings for you and your business on all kinds of topics. And if there's something that you think will be beneficial for your small business, let us know and we'll see if we can get you accommodated. So Eddy, let's hear it. Let's hear all about the sales and attracting and retaining customers.
Okay, thanks, Leslie. Good to be with you, Leslie, again, and the people that are on this webinar. I'm really excited to do these talks because as a volunteer with SCORE and working with Leslie, my only goal is to help each and every one of you. So I have no financial interest in this at all. I'm, like Leslie said, a SCORE volunteer. So I just mentor people and do these webinars because I really enjoy people and I want people to become better at sales and running their business. And lots of times with sales, it's kind of a mystery and people think, they have no idea how to get going in sales, that type of thing. So like Leslie said, I'm going to go through these slides and then it usually takes me about 40 minutes. And then if you will, write down your questions or, on the chat thing to Leslie, because I do want to answer them. And also there is a white paper that Leslie will tell you about on cold calling that I have that she'll be able to get you guys as well. So the first slide on the left, most people will recognize Peyton Manning, one of the best quarterbacks ever. The lady on the right, her name is Pat Summitt, and she was one of the best basketball coaches, women's basketball coach at the University of Tennessee for many years. And she holds numerous records. But I'm also an author and I do a fair amount of public speaking. And so I have quotes from both of these famous athletes and coaches. And Pat Summitt was an athlete herself, a basketball player before she became one of the best coaches in the country. And I want to tell you what their quotes are because sports and, people that are movie stars, all these things, they practice and prepare just like salespeople do. And so whether you are a salesperson yourself or you own a business and you have salespeople or, you're a one-stop shop, facility or whatever business, and you do it all yourself, you've got to practice and prepare. So Peyton's quote that I love is, "I never left the field feeling I could have done more to prepare, and that gives me peace of mind." So obviously Peyton was a fantastic quarterback and won, most of his games, but even when he lost or he didn't perform or his team didn't perform as well as he wanted, he knew that he had done everything possible to prepare. And that has everything to do with sales as well, which I'm going to get to in a minute. Now, Pat Summitt's quote that I love is, "Most people get excited about the games, but I have to get excited about practice because that's my classroom. So the point I want to make to each of you guys is that you must prepare and you must practice, not only for every sales call that you go out in person, but any Zoom meeting, things like this that we're on. If you're on a webinar or whatever with your clients, a video conference, text, emails, literally every communication that you have with a prospect or a client, you need to practice exactly what you're going to say and prepare. So this talk I'm giving, obviously I have practiced this a lot. I've done this a lot, but I still look through it before I do these webinars because I want to make sure I do a good job for you guys. And so the same thing applies with all of you that applies to these famous athletes. So there is an art to selling. And a lot of people don't think about that. And that's what I'm going to talk to you about, is the art of being a great salesperson. The first thing that's really important, and believe me, when I give this talk, I've made every mistake in the book that can be made. I wrote my book, and I do this because I want you and everybody that I coach and mentor to hopefully make fewer mistakes than I made. So, but one of the things I did throughout my whole career, and I retired about 4 years ago, was I had coaches, I had mentors, I had people that I got advice from. And whether I did what they suggested or not, I always wrote it down and thought about it. And I did a lot of the things that people suggested because I was interested in constructive criticism and I was interested in getting better. And unfortunately, a lot of people are not. I mean, we know that most people in life, they don't work on themselves at all personally or in their business. So it's really important to have a coach. And it's important to have an ongoing relationship with a coach because we cannot see what we're doing wrong. So if you look at Peyton Manning, obviously he made millions and millions of dollars. He had multiple coaches every year throughout his whole career. And he liked it. Why is that? Because he wanted to be better all the time. Every famous movie star, every famous, swimmer, dancer, you name it, they all have coaches because they like making a lot of money and they know they can't see what they're doing wrong. So it's important to have ongoing coaching. A lot of people think, oh, I'll just go get a coach for a couple sessions and then I'm done. And that's really not, it helps a little bit, but it's really not for the long term. It doesn't help. So you need to have an ongoing person or people. And even the people that I mentor, I suggest that they have 3 or 4 or 5 other people that they talk to on somewhat of a regular basis that can help them with their business, and they'll share information. So the goal of this is to increase sales. This is a cute little picture of a salesman or people talking to each other. A lot of people think that I'm going to talk about how do I get new clients, and I am. But I'm also going to talk about retaining clients because that is so critical. So regardless of how many clients you have, you don't want to lose any of them. And so it's really important to take good care of these clients. And I'm going to teach you some steps on how to do that in addition to gaining new clients. The first thing, you guys obviously are on this webinar, so that's good. You're interested in learning something. And when I used to go to lunch meetings and hear a speaker or whatever, my philosophy was if I gained one thing that I could think about in my business from that speaker that could help me, then it was worth whatever money I paid to go to the lunch. So, I don't think you guys are paying anything for this, but my goal is hopefully you'll get 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 things out of this. But the point is you've got to take action, and I don't mean necessarily invest financially, but invest your time, like I said, in having a coach. Leslie and the SBDC puts on a lot of great webinars, and so you're educating yourself. So this is a bunch of salespeople kind of thinking about what they're going to do next, which I think is kind of humorous because you kind of have to know what you're going to do next. So now I'm going to get into the 3 specific tips that I'm going to talk about today. And the first is organization. And to be successful in any business, I'm a firm believer that you must be organized. You've got to know what you're doing and when you're doing it. So I'm going to go through how I used to be organized in my business. And please understand, in no way am I suggesting you do exactly what I did. I'm just saying, listen to what I did, and then you do it your way, because I don't care how anybody gets organized. And I did a lot of stuff on paper, which I'll explain in a minute. Most of you will probably use computers, which is fine. But when I go to counsel people or mentor people, and I'd ask them what they have coming up, or tell me their organizational system, or what are they going to work on this week? They're like, I don't know. So I'm going to tell you my system, and I hope that'll help you. So I always had 2 stacks of projects. And what I mean by that is I worked by the project. So my primary business was what's called a manufacturer's rep, and I was in the floor covering business. So I represented companies that made carpet and tile and wood flooring for basketball courts and things like that. So a big part of what I did was working with architects that design buildings, facility managers at hospitals, churches, banks, contractors. Okay, so I would literally write down the name of the project on a piece of paper, and I'd put down the architect's name or the key person's name, their phone number, and then anything I knew about that project. And as I got more information about it, as time went on, I'd keep adding to that piece of paper. Okay, but then I had a follow-up date, which is going to be the next major thing I'm going to talk about, but they go hand in hand, really. So in the top right corner of every piece of paper, I wrote down a follow-up date for each project. So if an architect would tell me, why don't you get back with me, Eddie, in a couple of months? And so now it's August, I'd put 10/22, and I'd put it in the bottom stack. Okay, so the top stack is projects that I'm working on this month. The bottom stack is projects I'm working on starting September of 22, basically until the end of time. So, excuse me, at the end of every week, I would pull out the projects, the pieces of paper from the top stack, and I'd go through them. Now, a lot of you have probably heard the term funnel, and that's really, this is what I'm doing, is I'm creating a funnel. I'm narrowing down when I'm going to call on this person. So the people that are going to be called in August of 22 are in the top stack. And then on the weekend or at night, I would go through them and decide, okay, I'm going to call on these 3 projects this week, and the next week, these 3, and whatever. The bottom stack, I would take the whole stack out at the end of every month, and I would go through it. So when the end of August comes around, I go through it, and anything that says 9/22, then I put in the top stack. So that's kind of how I did it. I hope that makes sense. And that was, I was so organized that I always knew exactly what I was doing every day, every week. And I could tell you, what I'm doing 3 months from now, because I could look in that bottom stack and I could see that. I had a calendar, which probably is pretty old fashioned now, but I actually wrote down, these were appointments when I went out to see somebody face to face. So I would put those on an actual calendar. Then I had a weekly to-do list, and this correlated with the stacks of projects. So I had a basic manila folder that I would open up, and on the right side, I would have a piece of paper, and at the top, it'd say weekly to-dos, and those are basically my phone calls. Then on the left side of this folder were the stack of projects I'm going to call that week that correlated to the phone calls. So I might say, follow up with XYZ architect regarding, this school or this hospital building. And then I would have all my notes right there. So when I called him or her or emailed or whatever, I knew exactly what I was doing. I had a database where I kept all, names, phone numbers, all that kind of thing. So I could quickly find information on people. I learned early on that it's really important to plan at night or on the weekends. And most salespeople, of course, don't do this. And if you do some of the things that I'm talking about in this 40-minute talk, I promise you, you will be ahead of your competitors. And that's a good thing. So most people do nothing. They don't invest in themselves. They don't get help. They don't go to webinars. They don't have a mentor, none of that. You guys obviously have signed up for this, so good job. So plan at night or on the weekend. So when you walk into the office, which is probably in a lot of your cases, your house these days or wherever, that you know what you're doing, as opposed to at 8 or 9 o'clock on a Monday morning trying to figure it out, because then you're already behind. I had what I call the ABC list of clients. So basically the A's were the most important. They were not always the biggest. And an A client, and this is very important to delineate this, is an A client, in my opinion, is somebody where you, as the salesperson or the owner of the business, you trust them and you like them, and the feeling is mutual. So they like you, they trust you, they appreciate what you do. And we all know in business and in sales that a lot of clients don't care about us. And it's unfortunate, but it's just the fact. And so they're never going to be an A client. You know, they're rude to us, they just shop us to death, they're always complaining, and we all have those kinds of clients. So literally the A clients are the ones where you have a great relationship with them. Again, they appreciate what you do and you appreciate their orders and you have that good relationship. The B clients, obviously somewhere in between. The C clients are, you know, normally transactional clients where they might just buy once a year or a few times, you know, over your career. But your goal is to move people from C to B and B to A. And when you feel comfortable, it's really important to have these conversations with clients. So if you have clients that are on your A list, tell them. I mean, say, hey, you know, I really appreciate, you know, your business and you are very important to me. That goes a long way. Somebody who's a B client, tell them, you know, you're a very important client to me and I want us to be more important to each other. And the key thing to say there is, what can I do as the salesperson to have a better relationship with you? Don't ever say, at least I'm suggesting you never say, hey, I want you to buy more from me. I mean, that's, in my opinion, not good. You want to alter your presentation, your personality, whatever you're doing with that person so that you can move them to the A list. But just ask them, say, you're a very important customer, but I want it to be even better. And what can I do to do a better job working with you as a salesperson? Be efficient, which is really all these things we've talked about so far. And, you know, so I have some good traits for sales, and I'm highly efficient. And honestly, that made me very successful because I knew what I was doing, and that's really what I want for each of you. Going along with being efficient, this was one of the best compliments people would say to me is, Eddy, you don't seem to work that much. Because excuse me, they would see me, you know, they knew I went to the gym lots of afternoons or played golf or whatever. And that's because I was so organized, I didn't have to work. I mean, at the beginning of my career, yes, I had to work 60, 70, 80 hours a week. But once I got this system rolling, and this is really what the whole thing is about, I want you to understand is I want you to each have a system that you embrace and works for you. I don't care what the system is, as long as it works. And hopefully people will say to you, you know, you don't seem to work that much after a period of time. It's not going to happen right away if you're starting a new business. Next topic is follow-up. And, you know, again, like I said, follow-up goes really hand in hand with organization. One of the things I want to teach you guys is how to find out when to follow up. Because, like I said, I've made all the mistakes, and so I want you to not make them. So I used to kind of guess as to when an architect or a building owner or a building manager would be ready to talk about flooring. Well, what all that did, you know, a lot of the time was annoy them, because then I'd be following up too soon and they'd say, hey, I'm not ready yet. So I learned to say to them, when would you like me to follow up with you? Put it on them. And if they say, hey, next week, get back with me, or next month, or 4 months from now, it doesn't really matter if you have this system, like I explained with the organizational system, with the pieces of paper or on your computer or whatever you're doing. So asking them will take the pain out of it, and you won't annoy. And believe me, I annoyed a lot of people, because you call them at the wrong time. But I learned to try to annoy people less that were trying to buy from me or select my material. So I would say, when would you like me to follow up with you? And then you just use the system like I taught you a few minutes ago. Staying in touch with everyone is really critical. A lot of people think, well, they haven't bought anything from me. You never know where you're going to get your next lead, referral. So even if somebody never buys something from you, they may be a great source of referrals. They may know 5 people that need your product or your service. So that's why creating your database and having as many people in your database that you can stay in touch with is fantastic, whether they ever buy or not. You want to be at one step ahead of the client. I'll give you some examples, or one basic example. So a client would order carpet, and I would tell them that it's going to ship a certain time, and then it got delayed for whatever reason. There are always, not always, but there's problems sometimes, manufacturing problems or trucking problems, getting the carpet to Albuquerque where I live, or to New Mexico. But the point is, I would keep in touch with the manufacturer to know when this material is shipping, because nobody likes bad news, but what they really hate is to get bad news after it's too late. So the best thing is, if you know there's going to be a delay, there's any problem with anything going on with what you're trying to sell this person, is let them know as soon as you know. Say, I'm really sorry, but the manufacturer of this carpet, had a fire at their facility, or the machine broke, whatever it is, just tell them the truth. And yeah, they'll probably get a little upset, but at least you're being honest with them. Because the last thing you want is a client calling you, finding out what's going on with my order, when's my order. And so if you can be the person that's proactive, that's going to help you a lot. So being prepared, again, goes along with a lot of these things I've already talked about, knowing what you're doing. And when I say be prepared, that has to do with every sales call, every text message, every email. So back to the pieces of paper where I have the 2 stacks is no, I keep looking to the left because my dog is here and wants me to play with them. Sorry about that. So know what you're going to talk about the next time you talk to this client or you see this client. So keep your notes. And because you don't want to call them every time there's something little to talk about, but if you keep your notes and you know what 3 or 4 things you want to talk about on the next text or email, it's really good to do that. This is the 20-80 rule. Now, a lot of you know the 80-20 rule, which I'll explain, but in my opinion, it works both ways. The 80-20 rule is 80% of your sales will come from 20% of your clients. And that's pretty much true with every business. It's just the way it is. You're going to have some really big clients and you're going to have a lot of medium and little clients. But the 20-80 rule I have learned with salespeople is 20% of what we do as salespeople on a daily, weekly, monthly basis accounts for 80% of our income. And what does that mean? That means we do a lot of things that we're wasting time. We're doing things that aren't productive. And I did them all. So I learned. So what I'm suggesting you guys do is think about the things that you're doing that maybe aren't producing the results you want. I want to tell you about a big project that I sold by staying in touch with somebody. And that's what I was talking about before, is a couple slides before, is stay in touch with everyone, because you never know. So this architect I was working with for many, many years, he didn't do big projects, but I stayed in touch with him, and I made a little bit of money over, let's say, a 10-year period, but I kept calling on him. I kept staying in touch and letting him know what was going on in the flooring business. And then one day he called me and he said, Eddie, I have a really big project that this owner of a building has hired me to do, and I want you to handle all of the flooring. So I could make this a long story, but the short story is I did the whole thing. I mean, I was very fair with the person, but I made good money and it was a great project. And so, that was the big project I did with this one architect over, knowing him for 30 years. Yeah, sorry about that. That's my dog making some noise. So sorry. Okay, now I'm going to talk about the psychology of selling. Number one is you need to work on yourself. And most people will never work on themselves, but you need to work on yourself and try to figure out what are the things that you can do to improve yourself. And I'm going to get to some specific things about me, but we all do things sometimes that annoy people or whatever. So if you can look in the mirror, ask friends, ask family members, ask your best clients, what do I do that kind of bugs you, or how can I improve? That's really good. The next thing you need to work on is each of your clients' psychology. So you are the one that has to adjust. They will never change. I can promise you that. So you need to figure out, do they want to spend 5 minutes with you? Do they want to spend an hour learning about your product or service? You've got to figure them out and know how they want to work. So you got to know things like, how much do you talk? Do you talk too loud? Do you interrupt? Are you smiling when you talk? And speaking of smiling, even when you're on the phone with someone, people can tell whether you're smiling or not when you're on the phone. It's really powerful. This is huge with psychology. Be aware of your body movements. Sorry, I'm going to pick up my dog here. Sorry. Be aware of your body movements, what you do. It's real. All these things are really important. Eye contact is really important, and the difference between listening and hearing. So, look people in the eye, listen to what they have to say, and by doing that, I'm going to go to the next thing, which is the best listeners are the most well-liked, which is pretty interesting. So we hear a lot of things on a daily basis, but how much do we really listen and pay attention to? So think about that, because a lot of salespeople, including myself, I used to talk too much, and I learned to keep my mouth shut. And I'm going to tell you in a little bit some of those things. One of the things you want to do is listen without the intent to respond. We as salespeople are not TV or radio interviewers, or whatever. We're not on-air personalities where we've got to know what the next question is always. There's nothing wrong with just listening, and it's really fascinating being a great listener. And one of the things that's so important that I've learned to do is to take notes, and that helped me a lot. And even today, as a SCORE mentor and a volunteer, when my mentees, these are the people that come to me for counseling, mentoring, whatever you want to call it, I listen to them and I write things down that they say, and I don't interrupt them. And so taking notes is really a good way to talk less. And then I have my little system where when somebody's talking, if I want to, I have a question about it, or I want to respond when they're finished talking, rather than interrupting them, I put a little circle next to what I wrote in the left side, and that reminds me of the things I want to go back to, but I absolutely let them finish talking. Now, I use this analogy when I'm in person talking to a group, so it's a little bit harder on a video conference, but basically so if we were all in the same room and I was up in front speaking to all of you, I would ask one of you to come up, and then I'd ask one of you to stand 10 feet away from me and face me, and then I'd say, pretend that we work at the same office and we're greeting each other in the morning. So we walk towards each other, and I say hi and you say hi or good morning or something, and then I say, okay, let's do this again. And so we walk towards each other and you say hi, and I kind of put out my hand like this, like, hey, how are you? I know you weren't here a couple days last week. How are things? How are you doing? How's your family? And that shows real interest in the other person. And that's the point I want to make here, is that we want to be good listeners. We really want to be interested in the other person, because it's all about your customer. And so you want to really be attuned to what they're up to. Now I'm going to talk about communication, which has a lot to do with psychology as well. And take a look at this statistic. 58% of anybody's giving a talk, you're giving a sales presentation to somebody, 55% of what they, in their brain, what they perceive and hear is nonverbal. And it's just really the same with you listening to me right now. I mean, 38% is the tone of my voice, and only 7% is the words. I mean, to me, that's astounding. So each of us as salespeople, we need to think about our nonverbal, movements, how often we're doing things we shouldn't be doing, like looking away from the person. The tone of voice. Are we smiling when we're talking? Are we upset about something else going on in our life, and that's coming through when we're giving a sales talk? And only 7% is the actual words that we're using. So it's pretty amazing. So the things I have specifically learned, these are just a few, is to talk softer. And I always talk softer when I see that written down, because I have a tendency to talk pretty loud. But a lot of people that I worked with, or called on, they were just quieter, more introverted kind of people, which I'm very extroverted. So that's what I'm talking about, is tailoring your presentation to the person. So I learned to talk softer. I used to click my pen in meetings, and I thought, oh my God, this is crazy. So I don't do that anymore, and I take notes. The words "please tell me" are very powerful, and I've even added on to that, "will you please tell me?" And I'll explain that now. So if you talk to anybody, a family member, a friend, an associate, a customer, and you say the words, "will you please tell me about yourself? Will you please tell me when you may be in the market to buy, whatever it is you sell or provide?" Nobody, well, I shouldn't say nobody, because you never know who's going to get offended in today's world, but pretty much nobody's going to get mad at you. You're not asking anything personal. You're not saying, "tell me about your life, tell me everything about, this building you're designing." You're just saying, "will you please tell me when would be the appropriate time to get back with you? Will you please tell me about this project," whatever. And I promise you, it works with family and everything, because it's a nice way of saying that. Well, and I do this in emails too, and text. It's really a nice way to do it, because we have to be so careful with written communication as well as verbal, that people don't interpret it the wrong way. So if you say, "will you please whatever respond to my email," literally I'll do that. I'll say, "will you please respond to this email when you have a minute and let me know A and B," and I'll make it very simple, so hopefully they'll do that. The words "so that" or the word "because" will help you state the benefit of whatever you sell, your service or your product. So let's just say we're selling computers, and you should buy this computer so that you will get really organized with this sales system that Eddy talked to you about on this SBDC webinar. You should buy this computer because you will have so much fun using it. It's so easy to use. So the point is, if you use those words, then what follows is normally the benefit. And you probably, hopefully all are aware that we have, with every product or service, there's features and there's benefits. And for every feature, whether it's a car or whatever it is, you better tell the client or the prospect the benefit to them. Because if you just go through and, like, I'm not a big car person, but let's say some of you are or whatever, and somebody's trying to sell me a car and they're telling me about all the motor and all kinds of, I don't even understand what they're talking about. So they better be real simple, and they better tell me how it benefits me. Okay, I know how to juggle, and it gives me confidence. And I suggest that each of you, if you don't already, know how to do something that most other people don't know how to do. And whatever that may be, a lot of people, you might speak a second language, you might know how to do whatever, but I juggle, and I use this in my presentations. I'm going to explain that in a minute. But what I talk to people about with sales is, number one, you have to have passion. I mean, I hope you see the excitement or hear the excitement in my voice, because I like working with people like you guys. And of course, it's a little awkward because I can't see any of you, so that makes it harder for me. And I like doing it more in a, where I'm in a room together with you guys. But so I have passion for what I do, which is sales coaching. you must have passion for the product or service you're selling. And then what's going to happen is you're going to have fun with it. And then before you know it, you're going to make profit. And that's really what it is. You don't want to be in a situation where you're desperate. And sometimes we all, we go through those periods in our life where we might be, but I want you to have passion, get excited about what you sell, because it's contagious. And then you have fun. And that's what I did most days, not every day, but I had fun. And then, you make money. That's what it's all about. Now, a presentation without a demonstration is just conversation. And that goes back to my juggling. So I would juggle, and I do juggle in my presentations. And I would explain how juggling has everything to do with sales. We're trying to keep track of all these customers. We're trying to figure out what we're going to do next. We've got all these juggling balls in the air. So I highly suggest that you guys think about some way to do a presentation about your product or service to make it fun for the prospects, as opposed to just telling them. Because if you just talk and there's no presentation, then you're just really having a talk with somebody, and it's not nearly as effective. Sorry about my dog. So I want to end with this slide, which I'm an Eagle Scout, and when I grew up in, hang on just a second. No. Sorry about that. So I grew up in Kansas City. I live in Albuquerque now. The first time I was ever in New Mexico, I got on a bus with a bunch of other kids and came out to Philmont Scout Ranch, which is in the northern part of New Mexico. And I was a skinny kid. I was a scrawny kid. That's why we put this in the slide. The scrawny kid survives. And you'll understand in a minute why I'm saying this. So this was fun for me, hiking in the mountains and camping for 10 days, but it was also difficult, more difficult than the average 14 or 15-year-old boy who was probably stronger, than I. The reason I'm saying this is because we all have hard things that happen in our life, sad things that we have to overcome. And so I look back on this from time to time when I'm doing something that's difficult, and I think I did this. And there's many other things, you've done and I've done, whether it was last year or 10 years ago. And so I suggest that you try to think about things that you have done in your lifetime that were difficult. And so when you're getting ready to make sales calls and you're scared or whatever you're doing in your life, think back on the things that were hard for you. And I think that'll make you realize that you can overcome what you're facing now. So we talked about the 3 tips. We talked about, this is the summary. We talked about organization, how important that is. We talked about following up on everything, staying in touch with everybody, because you never know where you're going to get your next lead, where you're going to make your next $1 or $1,000 or whatever. And then the psychology of selling, how important that is, how we communicate with each other, how interested we are in the people that we meet and we work with, and communication, which has everything to do with psychology as well. So Leslie, I'm going to turn it over to you for Q&A.
Well, if you have any questions, type them into the Q&A, but I want to remind everyone, Eddy, do you want to talk about the handout on the cold calls? Because we've talked about that before. And again, cold calls to me personally are the scariest, or even when people come into your storefront, it can be a little scary on approaching customers. And we have some information available for them that you had put together on cold calls.
Yes, absolutely. So I wrote a white paper. It's like 4 pages. Takes you about 3 or 4 minutes to read it, on cold calling, because as Leslie said, that's pretty scary for a lot of people. And so I won't give away the whole thing, but basically really all you're doing, and I know Leslie makes a good point. I mean, some of you may have a retail store but the point is, if you are calling on a business, really with a cold call, your only thing that you want to do is meet the receptionist, the secretary. You want to meet whoever it is and get to know their name, a little bit about them, tell them what you do. And then finally is find out, ask them, who would I talk to that would be in charge of purchasing, computers, if that's what you sell or whatever it is, who would be that person, and just get that person's name and email and so forth. But the critical thing is to become business friends with the first person you meet, because that person can make or break you. And that's what we call, in sales, the gatekeeper. So it's really important that you meet that person, and because you're going to know them for a long period of time. And sales is a process. There's an art, like I talked about. And so with this process, you're going to meet one person, and then you're going to meet another person, and you're going to keep getting to know more people at that business. And you never know who the person is that's going to make the decision. So I go through this whole process, but that's what you want to do.
It sounds like you have a gatekeeper with you tonight. I completely understand with webinars and Zooming and stuff, and we have to adjust. And I have the dogs at home too, so I understand. I want to remind everyone that, again, we have the whole series of webinars coming up. They're all no cost confidential. We have the no cost confidential counseling also available locally. I chatted it over. If you need any information, I'm here to help. And if that's it, Eddie, I will release everyone this evening. And if you do have any questions, let me know, and I'll make sure that we get those answered for you. So bye, everybody. Bye, Eddie. Bye, your gatekeeper. And we will see you next time. You guys have a great rest of your week. Bye.
Thank you all for listening.